Hello guys, Crispy here, welcome back to another video. In this one, my friends, I'm going to be testing a GeForce RTX 5060 Ti 16GB GPU in Crimson Desert. What is Roach doing? That's a good question. Anyway, moving on, this one is the Palette Infinity 3 version of the card. I'm running it with the latest Nvidia drivers, and I'm not manually overclocking it. You can see all of its specs right here in Tech Power Up's GPU-Z, and over on the left, I'm pairing it with a Ryzen 7 9800X 3D and 32GB of RAM. It's a bit overkill for a 5060 Ti, I know, but you should get the same FPS with like a Ryzen 5 7600, for example, as that CPU shouldn't bottleneck this card with the settings that we're about to test. Let's get into it, shall we? And here we have it, guys. He's still doing that weird thing. I don't know. Anyway, let's go over the settings first. I am starting at the cinematic preset here, all right? And utilizing the 1440p resolution with DLSS 4.0 set to DLAA. So it's still 100% resolution scale here at 1440p. This doesn't look the best in this title, all right? This is a very, very noisy title. So I will also try out some DLSS 4.5 as well. And as for the ray reconstruction, it's now disabled. I will also try it, but I really think that with this tier of performance of GPU, you should not really use ray reconstruction, as it is super, super demanding in this title. Let's start counting our FPS now, and we're getting 50s, dropping into the 40s now. Cinematic settings, I mean, 1440p resolution at native does look decent, but I can see a bunch of issues with the graphics because of DLSS 4.0. Actually, it's not because of DLSS 4.0. Usually, in most titles, DLSS 4.0 does look really good, especially using DLAA at 1440p resolution. In this one, however, because it is so damn soft and noisy, even without any anti-aliasing or upscaling involved, that means that a good upscaler like DLSS 4 actually struggles a little bit. And you can see if I stand still here, the grass right behind us, it's just a smudge, basically. It's super soft, it blends the finer details together while moving with the wind and stuff, and it's just not a good look, you know? But if you can overlook that, well, you can get around 50-ish frames per second. It's not really amazing of an experience here with the 5060 Ti, unfortunately, but it is a playable one, and this game can actually be playable, and it's going to be pretty enjoyable with above 40 frames per second all of the time, in my opinion. But anyways, guys, it's a playable experience here with the 5060 Ti. We can make it better though, so let's try that out. All right. And the first thing that you can try, if you're okay with the DLSS 4 look, is frame generation. Let's turn that on with 2x FG. I'm not going to recommend like 3x and 4x because the artifacting becomes pretty annoying here, but 2x is fine with the baseline FPS that we were seeing here. So with 2x FG over those 50-ish frames per second on average, we now have 80s. Let me bring up the latency monitoring and the 1% lows up there now. Yeah, in terms of latency, it seems pretty bad. 60-something milliseconds, 60 to 70 milliseconds most of the time, actually. Dropping down into the 50s sometimes. But yeah, that's not very good in most titles. But in this one, it's barely noticeable, honestly. I'm here with mouse and keyboard, of course. It's not even with a controller. With a controller, you're not going to notice anything. In this one, because it has this mouse acceleration or mouse smoothing into it, and you can't really disable that, it works okay. It kind of masks the input latency from frame generation here, and it ends up being an alright experience even with this amount of latency, or average PC latency. Now, checking it out here in the, oh, are we going to get stuck? Yes. Okay, so he still can't do this. He can't duck. To get past these areas, you gotta get off the horse, basically. But yeah, we're getting like 80s. This is a little bit less intensive in city areas because it's more of a CPU demanding part of the game instead of GPU demanding, and we're always GPU bound here with the 9800X 3D and 5060 Ti. So you end up getting a little bit higher FPS in these areas. That's why I stick to forest areas and stuff like that, areas with a ton of vegetation in these GPU testing videos, because it makes more sense, basically. Let's go, call Roach again. All right, keep on going, down into the 70s again. So you get the idea. If you want 60 plus FPS all of the time with a little bit of added latency that's not really obnoxious in this game, in my opinion, it's totally fine. and you don't mind the look of DLSS 4.0, you can still retain that native resolution look, even though it doesn't look as good as native in other titles. And it's going to be a pretty decent experience. There's a ton of ghosting with the flying leaves as well in the picture right now. But if you guys want to know, if you disable this altogether, turn off the upscale mode, alright, the built-in anti-aliasing of the game looks like this. It might look better in like a phone screen because it's super over-sharpened now, but it has a lot more ghosting. And if I do this, it just falls apart completely. There is a frick ton of noise and ghosting. Look at the character right now. You can literally see another bow and another head there trailing, and a ton of noise at the same time. So this is kind of unusable here. And at 1080p, don't even get me started. We're gonna get there, of course, but I'm not going to use no upscaling at 1080p. Also, another thing that I would not recommend is quality DLSS 4 at 1440p. Unfortunately, this also makes it super noisy around the character there. I can see a little tiny bit of ghosting as well, not as bad as previously without the upscaling, but yeah, this doesn't look like quality DLSS in other titles at 1440p. It usually looks very good, and here it's a bit of a mess, although it does give you quite a lot of FPS, as you can see. 70s, not bad in terms of frame rates and smoothness, but everything is super noisy now. Even standing still like this, I can see a bunch of noise on the entire picture, basically, so yeah, it's very hard to recommend this, unless you have like a really small display, maybe 24-inch. Now, what I would utilize at 1440p resolution is DLSS 4.5. Although the experience was decent so far with DLAA and DLSS 4.0 plus frame generation 2 times, I think with DLSS 4.5 this game really shines. It does get a lot more intensive though. As you can see, we're getting 49 frames per second or 48 here. And with DLSS 4.0 DLAA, we're getting 60, guys. So 59 to 60 FPS compared to 49 FPS. That is a major difference, of course. It's about 15% of a difference there, and it will obviously impact your gaming experience quite a bit. But let's try it out like this for a second, guys. The latency is saying 0 milliseconds for some reason. I don't know why. That is definitely bugged. Like, there is still some latency added to this, even without the frame generation stuff. Let me turn that on, and it just disappears. Okay. All right, there we go. We got the latency back. I'm going to disable frame generation because I don't want to test it right now. I'm just troubleshooting here. I want to get that latency from the non-frame generation experience here. And it's getting like 70 milliseconds. Yeah, that's quite high. Reflex is also enabled there. I don't think it is actually enabled. It's probably still broken since release. You enable reflex without FG and it does nothing, basically. And you end up getting lower latencies with FG enabled. Maybe that's why I can't really tell much of a difference. Anyway, let's start counting our FPS here. It's DLAA with DLSS 4.5 at 1440p, so native resolution, 100% resolution scale at least. And it looks great right now. Looks much better and much more stable in terms of noise and smudginess and just that soft look that I was telling you about on vegetation. It is completely fixed at this point with DLSS 4.5. It does transform the game's look quite a bit here as an anti-aliasing, and I can totally recommend it, but it is very intensive. Once again, it drops around 10 frames per second compared to what we were seeing before. So is that performance drop worth it? Only you can decide that, alright? I will say that it is worth it, but only because I know what's next. We're gonna enable frame generation, maybe add quality DLSS, and it's going to be a good experience again, in my opinion. But I wouldn't really play like this, alright? If you're okay with 40-ish FPS average, again, the game is pretty playable. I don't like it when it drops into the 30s, though. It becomes pretty choppy then, you know, but that's just personal preference. Once again, there are people out there playing games at 30 FPS and they're just fine with it. Also, in terms of the look of the game right now, I said it's a much better visual fidelity experience than DLSS 4.0 gives, here with DLSS 4.5, but at the same time, it is over-sharpened. So it's a double-edged sword, my friends. If you like over-sharpened things, there is actually more detail here with DLSS 4.5, and you will like this over-sharpened look a lot, probably, but I don't. But there is a very nice and easy fix for it. And here's where frame generation really shines once again. Let's enable that on DLAA there. And this softens the picture slightly to the point where I feel like this is perfect in terms of sharpness at this point. It's not over-sharpened anymore. It's not super soft either, like DLSS 4.0 was. And you get a pretty stable image right now. And I just like it. This is a good experience right now, although the latency is now up into the 70 millisecond range. And that, my friends, starts becoming a little bit annoying. I'm not gonna lie, all right? Because you're getting pretty much the same latency as 35 or 40 FPS with 70 FPS smoothness, and you can definitely notice that difference there. Into the 60s, whenever it drops into the 60s, it's okay, but seeing 70 plus there, it just doesn't sit right with me, and I can definitely notice that delay when moving the mouse around, even with the mouse moving things and stuff like that. It works, it's playable, it's still enjoyable, and if you are with a controller, you're not even going to notice the input latency, I think. But yeah, it's starting to drop into the 60s as well. We all know that the perfect baseline, basically, for frame generation 2x is actually around 55 FPS, 50 to 60 most of the time, 60 preferably, you know? And here, we were well below that, so it's not perfect. I can also see a little bit more artifacting because the FPS are low, but at the same time, it looks way better than DLSS 4.0 on DLAA. So I think this is perfectly fine in terms of the visuals. However, I would like to see a little bit more FPS and a little bit lower latencies, and this is where the upscaling part comes in. So I'm going to use quality DLSS right now at 1440p. This is usually super over-sharpened if you aren't utilizing frame generation, but here with FG, it kind of fixes it. It is still a lot more over-sharpened than it was previously, though, with DLAA. I can definitely notice that right away. But I feel like this is acceptable in terms of sharpening. And now we're getting lower latencies of 50 to 60 milliseconds there. FPS are up into the 90s and 80s. So it's going to be a much smoother experience here, much more responsive one. I would choose these settings here to play with the 5060 Ti if you are at 1440p resolution. It gives a very good balance, I would say, between the visuals, the resolution, the sharpness, and smoothness, as well as responsiveness of the gameplay here. It's also super buttery smooth. There is zero stuttering in this game. That's one thing that I really like about Crimson Desert. It's actually kind of optimized and kind of not optimized at the same time. If you start talking about like ray reconstruction stuff and so on, then you could argue it's terribly optimized because it's the most intensive ray reconstruction experience that I've seen so far. There's usually, what, an 8% drop in performance enabling RR in other titles, like 5% drop in performance in Cyberpunk, for example, and here it's a 40% drop in performance, or like 50%. You drop your FPS to half, basically, with ray reconstruction enabled. And yeah, I'm not even talking about that max setting on the lighting quality, just ray reconstruction alone. All right, so it's pretty crazy. Now, there is also DLSS 4.5 preset L. This I don't like as much because even though it's a superior upscaler here and it actually looks really good right now, it doesn't add sharpening to the picture. And I think that sharpening from DLSS 4.5, it was over-sharpened, right? But with the frame generation added to it, it was basically perfect in terms of sharpness. And now, DLSS preset L here, plus frame generation, is not perfect anymore. However, if you don't like frame generation, and you decide to turn this off completely, I would actually choose the preset L over here because it gives you like 2 or 3 less FPS than the preset M, or 4.5 without the preset saying right there. But this is preset M, this is preset L. But yeah, this on quality is quite usable. In terms of visual fidelity, it looks the best of them all, obviously. The popping of the flowers there, what the heck. Gives you decent FPS, still around 60s. And I think if you don't want to play with frame generation, you should utilize the preset L. It's the most stable one as well, but it's just, it lacks the sharpness that I like to have to enable frame generation on top of. Because if you enable frame generation on top of this, it then becomes a bit too soft, in my opinion. We're talking about minimal differences, honestly, aside from here. Like, this is not a minimal difference whatsoever. Quality DLSS 4.5 preset L does look by far the best if you're not utilizing frame generation. Yeah, it's giving us 60 plus FPS all of the time. So again, if you don't want the added input lag from frame generation, this is going to give you 40-ish milliseconds, 50 milliseconds of input latency, which is the norm. We're not using FG right now, so this is the same as native FPS, basically. It is native FPS. Oh my god. Okay. Oh, what am I doing here? Okay, we're stuck. Roach, can you please... Okay. This is a weird place. It's kind of like a maze here. Oh boy. Okay, can I get out though? Come on. Come on, I think I can get out. Let's go, buddy. Let's go. FPS are dropping a lot as well, as you can see. So it's not going to be a 60 plus FPS experience, but it's going to be very close to that. In terms of averages, it will be above 60, so that's going to be an enjoyable experience, basically. If you don't like FG, this is the way to go. I like FG, makes things smoother, you know, so I would go with this and this on 2 times for the best experience at 1440p, in my opinion. 100 FPS now. I mean, come on. Although this windy situation right now, there's a lot of wind, and I can definitely notice like these bushes in front of me. They're kind of starting to blend together, unfortunately, like we saw with DLSS 4.0. And this didn't happen previously without this amount of wind. Now, let's disable the frame generation. Let's go back to DLAA over here, DLSS 4.0, and we're going to try it for a bit at 1080p resolution. This is another resolution that a lot of people with 5060 Ti's will be playing on. By the way, I don't know if you've noticed the VRAM allocation here and usages. The 8GB 5060 Ti, if you end up getting that instead of the 16GB, which is the one that everyone should get, by the way. But yeah, if you have the 8GB, it shouldn't matter too much in this game. This game doesn't consume a ton of VRAM, and especially if you start using like quality DLSS, it shouldn't go over the 8GB limit. But here we go, DLAA right now, DLSS 4.0, 1080p. Look at how blurry that is, dude. Jesus. Oh my god, I started moving and it becomes noisy as heck. Yeah, this is not what DLSS 4.0 looks like in other titles. It's so bad. Man. Guys, my inner thoughts are killing me. I know I said I wouldn't test this without upscaling at 1080p native, but here we are. I need to show this to you. This is the noisiest picture at 1080p native resolution that I've ever seen. The noisiest, the blurriest at the same time, and the most ghostingly image that I have ever seen in a game. Oblivion Remastered comes very close to this, and at 4K resolution, this one actually looks better than Oblivion Remastered for some reason, but here at the lower resolutions, especially 1080p, it's just terrible. This looks like 720p in some other games, guys. Anyway, so DLSS 4.0 on DLAA is not a good way to play the game. Let's try DLSS 4.5 on DLAA, and this instantly drops us into the 50s, but at least we get that sharpness back, and at 1080p resolution, it looks seeable right now, okay? I can see things, I can see some detail at the distance as well, and in terms of FPS, it's fine. I would expect a lot higher FPS from a 5060 Ti, but again, DLSS 4.5 kills the frame rate a little bit, so it drops our FPS under 60 most of the time. It's not the end of the world, still going to be a playable experience, and if you have a 1080p screen, I would probably end up playing like this, especially with DLSS 4.5 plus frame generation. Now, of course, if you don't want to use frame generation, there's always the option of using quality DLSS, which is not a good idea because it's 720p internally in this game, and although it gets you 70 plus FPS, the picture became a noisy mess. Nope, I would not do this. What I would probably end up doing is DLSS 4.5, preset L. This looks a little bit more stable. Once again, looks a little bit better. It's not as over-sharpened as the preset M. And it actually... Oh, man, but it 50s? Are you... What? I died? What happened? Hello? What is this? Fast forward? These guys poisoned me?
Oh, no.
What is going on?
No, I don't think...
Also, this doesn't look like cinematic settings, right? I mean, come on. Sometimes this game looks beautiful. Other times it leaves something to be desired, for sure. So, I am awake now. Where's Roach? Can I eat from this? Cook. No, I don't want to cook. I want to eat. Anyway... Yeah, still pretty intensive, right? At 1080p resolution. In order to make this game look good in terms of anti-aliasing, you gotta sacrifice those 60 plus FPS all of the time that we were seeing with the DLSS 4.0. And that is a shame. That is a huge shame, especially with a 5060 Ti, which should be a very strong 1080p resolution GPU, you know? Also, if you're wondering... Because I know, you don't need to play on cinematic settings and stuff. If you turn it down to like, I'm even going to turn it down to medium. We went from 56 FPS to 66 or 67 FPS. All right. So there's not that big of a difference in terms of the FPS that you get between like high or ultra and cinematic. All right. There's a 10 FPS difference between cinematic and medium. So... yeah, if you drop it from cinematic to ultra, you're gonna get like 2 or 3 FPS, and so on. It's just, it kind of sucks, alright, in terms of the scalability of FPS here in this title. Now, this is the best looking image that we've seen so far, but if you want 60 FPS plus, well, you can use quality DLSS, which is not going to be good, because now it's back to being pixelated and noisy. All right, and it barely improves, actually. It gives you 10 FPS. Not amazing, not amazing. So let's go back to DLAA, or you could utilize the frame generation, which, again, yes, this card supports up to 4 times. I'm going to showcase that. All right, there we go. But I can see a ton of... Why does this keep happening? Oh, here they are again. What the heck, bro? Anyway, I can see a lot of artifacting happening with 4 times FG if your FPS aren't with a baseline of like 80, alright? So 4 times FG is great in some games. In this one, since it has so much detail everywhere, and our baseline FPS were at 50 something, it's not good, guys. It's not good. Alright, it just becomes way too artifacty. I don't like it. That's why I'm choosing 2 times FG every single time. It gives a good balance. Okay, I'm really tired of this. Let's move. I'm just gonna load the previous save. Okay, we're back here with the 2 times frame generation. 100 FPS, feeling really smooth, feeling pretty responsive at the same time. This is good. It's a tad bit soft, but it is what it is. Preset L is actually working pretty well here in terms of stability. And, well, if you want a little bit more sharpening, because that's mostly the big difference here between 4.5 and the preset L, yeah, you can have it here with DLAA, a little bit higher FPS as well, and the preset M, basically. It's going to be pretty stable of an experience still, since we're not upscaling from anything, you know, it's still DLAA here. So this is how I would play at the 1080p resolution, guys. It looks fine to me, it will look okay on a 1080p screen, and in terms of FPS, always above like 90 is what you should expect with FG 2 times. Yeah, pretty stable, pretty solid, pretty smooth. Let's stop it there, though, and let's try something crazy now. Well, it's not that crazy. Let's try 4K resolution. Now, at 4K, maybe you should stick with 4.0 with the 5060 Ti, because it's less intensive, you know? And we're still at the... Oh my god, this is so sharp. Oh, this is good now. This looks lovely. 30 FPS, alright, not too bad. I guess an overclocked 5060 Ti, if you manually do it, should achieve like 3 more FPS or so. It gets like 10% faster, and 10% here is 3 FPS. Also, this vegetation very close to us. Yeah, this looks like trash. It still has a ton of noise added to it and stuff. And of course, 29 FPS sometimes is not great. So even if you OC, there will be some areas where your FPS will drop quite a bit, and it's going to deliver a pretty unstable experience here. It's not a good one, alright? I think you should utilize performance DLSS if you have a 5060 Ti and you're playing at 4K resolution. I can see a lot of noise right now. Not too terrible though, especially compared to the other resolutions with DLSS. Still seeable, but it's very smudgy though. Yeah, that's for sure. I don't like it too much, especially, again, after playing with DLAA there for a second. So this is a good baseline frame rate for us to enable some frame generation on top of. And although I would not do it here, because it gets even softer and blurrier, like, overall it's not too terrible. If you look at things at the distance, for example, it's fine. But if you look at the vegetation very close to you and the horse's hair and stuff like that, it's super noisy right now. Although our FPS are actually pretty decent, our latencies are fine. This is playable. This could be enjoyable. On a small display, I guess you could get by with this. Now, with DLSS 4.5, that would probably be my pick. Yeah, with the FG enabled, it's still above 70 FPS. Latency is not super high. It's not hitting 70. Well, now it is. But I guess this... Yeah, it changes the look so much with DLSS 4.5 that I would choose this, even with the higher latency, guys. And 70 plus FPS pretty much at all times. Maybe it will drop into the 60s sometimes, but with a controller it doesn't really matter too much because you can't really tell the latency difference, honestly. And even with mouse and keyboard, yeah, it's close to 70 milliseconds, but it's not all that terrible. The baseline FPS were actually decent, right around 50 frames most of the time, with some drops to the 40. It's fine. It's doable. It's playable. I could definitely enjoy this, guys. Like this. 70 there. I tried to lower it down from 60 with those vegetations, those bushes. 72. Yeah, it's not dropping too much. Also, yeah, there is a lot of popping, but this is just from the game itself. You can't really change that, unfortunately. I hope they add a slider for the LOD for us to adjust that, because especially on higher end GPUs like a 5080, 5090, 5070 Ti, 9070 XT, it would be great. There's also, again, the option of playing with 4.5 if you prefer that softer look. I do like my sharper look, though. You already know how I feel about this, basically. With FG, I would choose 4.5 preset M. Without FG, I would choose preset L, because it gives you that great looking image, super sharp and detailed. But then with the FG, it gets slightly softer. Still, it's a good way to play the game if you prefer this. It shouldn't be too different in terms of FPS, maybe like 2 or 3 FPS lower, and that's about it. It's very, very similar, preset L and M in this title. The major difference is that sharpness. The hell? What happened? Oh! What the hell? You can resize Crimson Desert. So if you go into the menu and to the side of the display, it actually allows you to... That's ridiculous! What the hell? Was that just a one-off? No, in the menu, same thing happens. Ultra wide, friends, ultra wide. No, not really. All right, the aspect ratio is all messed up. That's the most ridiculous thing I did not know about. This is not even borderless. This is full screen. Full screen shouldn't do that. All right, anyway, guys, let's go back to 1440p resolution with DLSS 4.5 on quality with frame generation, because I want to try the ray reconstruction setting now. So this is probably how most people will end up playing this game, at least in my opinion. Most people will probably have 1440p displays, and these were my preferred settings to play at this resolution. I'm looking for an area where we can enter. Oh boy, okay, yeah, definitely not here, definitely not here. I think it's in this direction. Wait, stop it! I didn't even want to go there. Okay, here it is, guys, this area right here. It looks all right. Right, it's not amazing, really. Let me go here so the lantern turns on. The lighting is being casted on the walls and stuff like that and on the swords there, but look at what happens when we enable ray reconstruction here. Bam! It actually transforms the game. The reflections on the swords look amazing. The light bouncing off of the walls and stuff, it looks way better in these scenarios, all right? And this is why a lot of people do choose to lower down their FPS to a really low value and play with ray reconstruction anyways, because it looks really, really good. It's worth it for some people. For me, I don't think I would sacrifice my FPS this much, because look at the latency now. It is really high, almost touching 90 milliseconds. It would probably touch 90 milliseconds in vegetation areas, forest areas, because it's more intensive there. Remember, this is the least intensive part of the game, and we're getting 60 FPS with 2 times FG on top. And we're already on quality DLSS. So it's not like we can just lower this down and make it look very similar to what we've been playing on, right? Like, no, it will look like crap if you use performance. And it's not like you can add more generated frames here and make it better and smoother. Well, it will be smoother, but there is going to be a lot of artifacting. I can notice it right away. And that latency will be even worse. Slightly, though, but yeah, it is worse. And also, if you disable the frame generation, you end up with 30 to 40 frames per second. Here, which again is not very intensive. It will be more intensive out in the fields. So it will likely drop from 30 frames per second, guys. This also affects the visual fidelity of the water and the rivers and stuff. It looks a lot better with ray reconstruction, all right? But I mean, we were getting around 60 FPS, right? And now we're getting 30s. Look at this, 37 FPS. I disable ray reconstruction. And we get 70. Okay? It basically goes from super playable and smooth, actually. It's a smooth experience above 60 FPS most of the time, to an unstable mess and kind of unplayable in my opinion. Especially if you're used to playing games at 60 frames per second or more. And you should be if you have a 5060 Ti GPU, right? The developers need to work on that optimization with ray reconstruction. It eats away way too many FPS, coupled with that maximum lighting setting. If you turn on ray reconstruction, you're stuck with the maximum lighting quality here, and the maximum lighting quality is another setting that also drops your FPS quite a lot. Not as much as ray reconstruction though, as you can see. It goes to 53 frames per second from 60 something there, and if we enable ray reconstruction on top of this, the maximum settings, it gets 36, pretty much the same as we saw previously. So yeah, that ray reconstruction alone, I get that, like, from cinematic to max lighting, sure, give me an FPS drop, maybe it changes a lot in terms of the lighting, but that's not really the case, you know? It's the ray reconstruction that changes the most in terms of lighting and the visuals and stuff, not that max lighting quality setting. And the ray reconstruction alone, just eats away way too many FPS for what it is. But it's not the end of the world. You're going to get around 60 FPS with FG. I just think that the other experiences with more FPS, smoother gameplay, and also lower latency were just better experiences overall. So that's been it. Thanks very much for watching. Catch you in the next one. Love you all. Bye-bye.